Hello there, little masters, and welcome to another weekly episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where tonight, well, the good stuff is going to help you reconnect with your inner Hobbit.
West to Hall, my friends. I'm Shawn Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, the Pippin to my Merry, Alan Sisto.
Oh, am I younger than you now, huh?
Well, you're Gondor and I'm Rohan, so I kind of
there you go.
That
works. That works.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm more of a troublemaker, but probably so. That's
probably, and yeah.
Well,
probably have more herb lore.
I'll just leave that where it is. Well, thank you, Shawn.
No.
I'll make sure that the proper authorities understand that.
Thank you.
Today, we would like to welcome all of you to our third annual. Is this really our third
Crazy,
annual?
huh?
It is.
I know. Yeah.
Well, the first one that came out, the first one was right after our podcast first came out. So
it was
our
our sixth episode, yeah.
Something like that, yeah. So it's our third annual Tolkien Reading Day special. It's hard to believe we've done this 3 times now, but, well, there you have it. Now, for those of you not familiar with the event, Tolkien Reading Day has been organized by the Tolkien Society since 2003. They have it to encourage fans to celebrate and promote the life and works of J.R.R. Tolkien by reading favorite passages.
And it happens every year on March 25th, today. It's the date of the downfall of Sauron and the destruction of Barad-dûr. This year, it just happens to fall on our regularly scheduled Sunday, which is very convenient, I have to say.
Indeed it is. And every year, the Tolkien Society chooses a different theme to focus on. Now, this year's theme is Home and Hearth, the Many Ways of Being a Hobbit.
So what that means is that we're going to be spending some time this episode reading some of our favorite passages from The Lord of the Rings that remind us what it means to be a Hobbit. You know, why Lord of the Rings? Well, mostly because we've been reading through The Hobbit already.
Well, that is true. You know, and of course, we'll get back to The Hobbit in our next episode next week. Yeah. But today, we're going to spend our time reading, not talking. Well, at least not talking quite as much. But before we get to that, our Tolkien quote of the day.
All right. Now, we've chosen an appropriate one, I think. This quote actually comes to us from Tolkien's letter number 213. This is the one he wrote to Deborah Webster in October 1958. And you're going to recognize it as soon as I start reading it. He said, I am in fact a hobbit in all but size.
Ah, yes.
I like gardens, trees, and unmechanized farmlands. I smoke a pipe and like good plain food, unrefrigerated, but detest French cooking. I like and even dare to wear in these dull days ornamental waistcoats. I am fond of mushrooms out of a field, have a very simple sense of humor, which even my appreciative critics find tiresome. That last one sounds a bit like us.
It does. Even our appreciative critics do find our sense of humor
tiresome.
A little tiresome.
Back to the professor. I go to bed late and get up late when possible. I do not travel much. Very famous quote. I'm sure you've all seen it on a meme. And honestly, I don't think that there is a more succinct description of what it means to be a hobbit. What do you think, Alan?
No, that is exactly what it means to be a hobbit. And it makes me realize that as much as I'd like to be a man of Gondor, I'm really more of a hobbit. I just, well, except for the smoking a pipe.
Same here.
I detest French cooking. I mean, can I just admit it? I do. I like good, plain food.
There are a handful of French dishes that are really, really tasty if done right.
I'm sure there are. I wouldn't know.
But you wouldn't
unless French toast counts.
Oh, sure. We can French bread.
I suppose French toast, French bread.
Maybe we can count all the Cajun and Creole food from Louisiana that I grew up with, and that'll expand it a little bit.
And I have more of a 21st century version of ornamental waistcoats. I have a bunch of Hawaiian shirts. That's my ornamental waistcoats. They're very bright.
They are very ornamental.
Very
indeed.
Colorful. Mm-hmm. They're not dull, that's for sure.
Not just simple greens and yellows, I'm sure. It's
No. Lots of palm trees. And
there's a bird on there somewhere. And
tiki torches and, all sorts of things.
Yep. Well, it's funny how much that description matches what we see of hobbits in the books.
Exactly, not just us. Yeah. Let's get it back to Tolkien.
Not just you. Right. I don't have any ornamental waistcoats.
No. But you're definitely. I mean, you definitely have a simple sense of humor. I know you go to bed late.
I do go to bed late, and I wake up late when possible, which is not usually possible.
Which is not right. We have young
children.
Kids, so waking up late is like 6:30.
Yeah, good food and. Yeah.
So, like you said, it's very much like the way the hobbits are described in the Legendarium, right? Mm-hmm. We get the description of the hobbits in The Hobbit, that they dress in bright colors, so there's your ornamental waistcoats.
Yeah.
They get the
Chiefly
deep,
green and
fruity
yellow,
laughs.
I believe. Yep.
Yeah, chiefly green and yellow. That's right. I love the kind of natural earthy tones, and the big deep fruity laughs that he described. I love that fruity laughs.
What a great adjective for a laugh.
It is, isn't it?
Fruity
I never would
laugh,
have thought of that, but yeah, sweet and
Yeah, exactly. Sweet,
sort of
and fresh and
refreshing. Yeah.
juicy. Well, that doesn't sound quite as good.
Well, I hope it's not a juicy laugh. Yeah. Get your handkerchiefs out,
Come on,
folks.
man. Say it, don't spray it. But simple foods, that's another one. We've seen
yeah, you're right.
all the simple foods that Bilbo's fond of. He loves his bacon and his eggs and toast for breakfast.
Yeah.
Thinking of some of the things we saw at the party, scones and cakes and tarts and pies and the cold chicken and pickles, which is just another Sunday for me. But and of course the smoking a pipe.
Well,
that's kind of the obvious one.
Very hobbity. Yes, quite.
Yeah. And then we get a little bit more about hobbits in Lord of the Rings, don't we?
We do.
A bit.
I love that line that they actually got in the narration to the opening of the film about how they love peace and quiet and good-tilled earth.
Yeah.
That's so
That was a great line and so well delivered in the movie.
Oh, it really was.
Yeah, and the kind of the distrust of machines, concerning hobbits says they did not understand or like machines more complicated than a forge bellows, a water mill, or a hand loom.
Those aren't especially complicated, I suppose.
Pretty simple machines.
I mean, they're machines, right? I mean, these people aren't,
sure,
they're not living as Neolithic cavemen just barely getting by with a piece of flint, but, they're not making iPhones and cell towers either, thank goodness.
Right, exactly.
I love that they're fond of simple jests at all times and of 6 meals a day when they could get them.
6 meals. Man, who wouldn't be fond of 6 meals a day if you can get them?
I'd only be fond of that for about 45 years before I keeled over, but yeah.
As long as you can get lots of exercise.
There you go.
Around.
Yeah.
And, of course, let's not forget Tolkien mentions the love of mushrooms.
Love of mushrooms.
We're going to see a little bit of that in our readings today.
That we will. Well, then, with that out of the way, why don't we go ahead and get to our Tolkien Reading Day selections on Home and Hearth, the many ways of being a hobbit.
Let's do that. And I think we've got you starting right at the beginning, don't we?
We do. And what we're going to do, folks, is we're going to go through chronologically to sort of get a feel for things. These are all from The Lord of the Rings, and they're all kind of talking a little bit about what it is to be a hobbit in one way or another, as I think you'll see. So I'm going to start out with a passage from A Long Expected Party. This actually takes place, this is right before the party. So
this is the first or second page, isn't it? Maybe second page?
It is. I think it's just second page or so. So here we go.
Yeah.
12 more years passed. Each year, the Bagginses had given very lively combined birthday parties at Bag End. But now it was understood that something quite exceptional was being planned for that autumn. Bilbo was going to be 111, 111, a rather curious number, and a very respectable age for a hobbit. The old Took himself had only reached 130. And Frodo was going to be 33, an important number, the date of his coming of age. Tongues began to wag in Hobbiton and Bywater, and rumor of the coming event traveled all over the Shire. The history and character of Mr. Bilbo Baggins became once again the chief topic of conversation, and the older folk suddenly found their reminiscences in welcome demand. No one had a more attentive audience than old Ham Gamgee, commonly known as the Gaffer. He held forth at the Ivy Bush, a small inn on the Bywater Road, and he spoke with some authority, for he had tended the garden at Bag End for 40 years, and had helped old Holman in the same job before that. Now that he was himself growing old and stiff in the joints, the job was mainly carried on by his youngest son, Sam Gamgee. Both father and son were on very friendly terms with Bilbo and Frodo. They lived on the hill itself, in number 3 Bagshot Row, just below Bag End. "A very nice, well-spoken, gentle hobbit is Mr. Bilbo, as I've always said," the Gaffer declared, with perfect truth, for Bilbo was very polite to him, calling him Master Hamfast, and consulting him constantly upon the growing of vegetables. In the matter of roots, especially potatoes, the Gaffer was recognized as the leading authority by all in the neighborhood, including himself. "But what about this Frodo that lives with him?" asked old Noakes of Bywater. "Baggins is his name, but he's more than half a brandybuck, they say. Beats me why any Baggins of Hobbiton should go looking for a wife away there in Buckland where folks are so queer." "And no wonder they're queer," put in Daddy Two-Foot, the Gaffer's next-door neighbor, "if they live on the wrong side of the Brandywine River and right agin the old forest. That's a dark, bad place, if half the tales be true." "You're right, Dad," said the Gaffer. "Not that the Brandybucks of Buckland live in the old forest, but they're a queer breed, seemingly. They fool about with boats on that big river, and that isn't natural. Small wonder the trouble came of it, I say. But be that as it may, Mr. Frodo is as nice a young hobbit as you could wish to meet. Very much like Mr. Bilbo, and in more than looks. After all, his father was a Baggins. A decent, respectable hobbit was Mr. Drogo Baggins. There was never much to tell of him, till he was drownded. Drownded, said several voices. They had heard this and other darker rumors before, of course, but hobbits have a passion for family history, and they were ready to hear it again. Well, so they say, said the Gaffer. You see, Mr. Drogo, he married poor Miss Primula Bandybuck. She was our Mr. Bilbo's first cousin on the mother's side, her mother being the youngest of the old Took's daughters, and Mr. Drogo was his second cousin. So Mr. Frodo is his first and second cousin, once removed either way, as the saying is, if you follow me. And Mr. Drogo was staying at Brandy Hall with his father-in-law, old Master Gorbodoc, as he often did after his marriage, him being partial to his victuals, and old Gorbodoc keeping a mighty generous table. And he went out boating on the Brandywine River, and he and his wife were drownded, and poor Mr. Frodo only a child and all. I've heard they went on the water after dinner in the moonlight, said old Noakes, and it was Drogo's weight as sunk the boat. And I heard she pushed him in, and he pulled her in after him, said Sandyman, the Hobbiton miller. You shouldn't listen to all you hear, Sandyman, said the Gaffer, who didn't much like the miller. There isn't no call to go talking and pushing and pulling. Boats are quite tricky enough for those that sit still, without looking further for the cause of trouble. Anyway, there was this Mr. Frodo left an orphan and stranded, as you might say, among those queer Bucklanders, being brought up anyhow in Brandy Hall. A regular warren by all accounts. Old Master Gorbodoc never had fewer than a couple of 100 relations in the place. Mr. Bilbo never did a kinder deed than when he brought the lad back to live among decent folk. But I reckon it was a nasty knock for those Sackville Bagginses. They thought they were going to get Bag End that time when he went off and was thought to be dead. And then he comes back and orders them off, and he goes on living and never looking a day older, bless him. And suddenly he produces an heir, and has all the papers made out proper. Sackville Bagginses won't never see the inside of Bag End now, or it is to be hoped not. There's a tidy bit of money tucked away up there, I hear tell, said a stranger, a visitor on business from Mickledelving in the West Farthing. All the top of your hill is full of tunnels packed with chests of gold and silver and jewels, by what I've heard. I haven't even heard more than I can speak to, answered the Gaffer. I know nothing about jewels. Mr. Bilbo is free with his money, and there seems no lack of it, but I know of no tunnel making. I saw Mr. Bilbo when he came back a matter of 60 years ago, when I was a lad. I'm not long come prentice to old Holman, him being my dad's cousin, but he had me up at Bag End, helping him to keep folks from trampling and traipsing all over the garden while the sale was on. And in the middle of it all, Mr. Bilbo comes up the hill with a pony, and some mighty big bags, and a couple of chests. I don't doubt they were mostly full of treasure he'd picked up in foreign parts, where there be mountains of gold, they say. There wasn't enough to fill tunnels. Oh, but my lad Sam will know more about that. He's in and out of Bag End, crazy about stories of the old days he is, and he listens to all Mr. Bilbo's tales. Mr. Bilbo has learned him his letters, meaning no harm, mark you, and I hope no harm will come of it. Elves and dragons, I says to him, cabbages and potatoes are better for me and you. Don't go getting mixed up in the business of your betters, or you'll land in trouble too big for you, I says to him. And I might say it to others, he added with a look at the stranger and the miller. But the Gaffer did not convince his audience. The legend of Bilbo's wealth was now too firmly fixed in the minds of the younger generation of hobbits. But he's likely enough been adding to what he brought at first, argued the miller, voicing common opinion. He's often away from home, and look at the outlandish folk that visit him. Dwarves coming at night, and that old wandering conjurer Gandalf and all. You can say what you like, Gaffer, but Bag End's a queer place, and its folk are queerer. And you can say what you like about what you know no more of than you do of boating, Mr. Sandyman, retorted the Gaffer, disliking the miller even more than usual. If that's being queer, then we could do with a bit more queerness in these parts. There's some not far away that wouldn't offer a pint of beer to a friend if they lived in a hole with golden walls. But they do things proper at Bag End. Our Sam says that everyone's going to be invited to the party, and there's going to be presents, mark you, presents for all, this very month as is.
Very well done.
Well, thank you, sir.
I know that was kind of a long one.
That was a long one with a lot of dialogue.
Yeah.
That much dialogue is a little bit of a challenge, but I love the Gaffer. I love that character. He's just
great, yeah.
so fun and so full of stories, and you can just imagine this
these
old
hobbits love
guy with
just
decades
sitting
of
and
stories.
telling all these stories in the pub, and those hobbits do love their stories, don't they? Even stories
do.
they've already heard before.
They do. That's part of their thing, isn't it? They're very much this. If any of you ever lived in a small town and you know kind of how gossip gets around, and I mean, there's good and bad to that in the sense that they're fun stories, but if you're ever on the wrong end of one, you're kind of ruined.
Because everybody knows everybody else.
Exactly.
And, just things get around.
Things get around quickly. What do they say? Tongues begin to wag, I think was the line. And it's just the nature of small town gossip. But they're all very.
No, that's what's going on. That's the news.
Yeah,
that's what they've got to talk about.
You're right. I mean, they're not dealing with the
world. They're not
world
talking
events.
about. These are their current events.
Exactly.
And these are their stories.
This is their Twitter feed.
Right, exactly.
It is.
It's about current events, and it's about people they know. It's about the stories that they've heard. It's about the things they believe. All of that really wrapped up into one. It's just that their world is so small.
Exactly.
That
really is the nature of this. Isn't it? It's very kind of parochial or provincial. Mm-hmm. I also noticed there's a lot of kind of fear of the other, right? I mean, it's not just like the dwarves or Gandalf. It's the Brandybucks even, I mean, just people who are a little different than you. They're still hobbits. But,
we get a lot of this early on, and it occurs to me that it's a luxury of living in a world that's so small. That the short distance from Hobbiton to Buckland feels like another world. Those people are weird.
They really are weird, yeah.
It's almost like, I don't know. It's almost like Northern Californians and Southern Californians.
That's not a bad comparison, actually, because I do think so many of the folks up in Northern California don't like us.
Yeah.
You thought I was going to say I thought they were weird, huh?
I did, yeah. But, I mean, hey, I lived in Southern California, and I remember how it was. It's to the rest of the country, and probably to the rest of the world, it's all one state. But actually, you go there, and it's actually...
it's radically different.
It's very different, yeah. It's something like that. But it's kind of... it's more severe than that because they really do think they're weirdos.
They do. That's true.
And the hobbits, I mean.
I knew what you meant. Yeah, I knew what you meant.
There's mistrust there, and we'll see some of that in the passage that I'll read in a little bit.
Yeah.
Just the mistrust of people who grew up just a few miles down the road.
Just a few miles away.
Yeah.
That are just like you. Probably related.
Probably, yeah.
We get a mention of the fear of water, radically strong mention of the fear of water. A reminder of something that we don't see really in our culture.
It's funny how quickly that comes in. We were talking about this, was it the last
episode? It was a recent
invention.
It was something that Tolkien didn't originally have in the story, which is why we saw, Bilbo talking about swimming for the other shore and, a lot of other things that made it clear that they weren't afraid of water yet. But here it is very early in this tale.
Yeah.
I love this, though. This is interesting because we don't really see this in any of our Western cultures, at least. I can't speak for the rest of the world, but the idea of this extended family living together, like Master Gorbadoc had, a couple hundred relations in the place. I can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
Basically an entire extended clan all living together.
All living in one house. Well, I guess if they've got the space and...
the resources to feed that many people,
Right.
Him being partial to his victuals and all.
That is something kind of fun. These hobbits, they may talk about how weird the Brandybucks are, but they do appreciate his table.
You bet they do. Well, and that kind of brings me to the very kind of the last little thought that I had here is that this recognition that generosity is an admirable trait. I love that. That idea that, hey, you know what? We could do with more of that.
And I like the fact that, Gaffer says that as... He says his saying that is a wise bit of insight, because he's sort of transcending all this parochialism at this point, and he's now saying, look, hey, they may be weird, but we could do with a little bit of that kind of weirdness.
That
because
kind of
there's
weirdness
people
is a good thing.
There's people in this area who would not, give a pint of beer to a friend in need.
Yeah, that's true.
That's cool because you start to see. Even this early on, that they're, a hobbit like the Gaffer is able to see past this parochialism at times.
Mm-hmm. That's true, at least at times, yeah. Well, you've got, because I don't want to, this is the, what do we say? This is the Tolkien Reading Day.
This is the Tolkien Reading Day, not the Alan and Shawn Talking Day.
So I'm going to have you pick up a fairly lengthy passage from Chapter 4, right?
Yes, this is from Chapter 4 of Book 1, A Shortcut to Mushrooms. And this is the first appearance of old Farmer Maggot.
Ah, good old Farmer Maggot. Love this guy.
They passed along the edge of a huge turnip field and came to a stout gate. Beyond it, a rutted lane ran between low, well-laid hedges towards a distant clump of trees. Pippin stopped. "I know these fields and this gate," he said. "This is Bam Furlong, old Farmer Maggot's land. That's his farm away there in the trees." "One trouble after another," said Frodo, looking nearly as much alarmed as if Pippin had declared the lane was the slot leading to a dragon's den. The others looked at him in surprise. "What's wrong with old Maggot?" asked Pippin. "He's a good friend to all the Brandybucks. Of course he's a terror to trespassers and keeps ferocious dogs, but after all, folk down here are near the border and have to be more on their guard." "I know," said Frodo. "But all the same," he added with a shamefaced laugh, "I am terrified of him and his dogs. I have avoided his farm for years and years. He caught me several times trespassing after mushrooms when I was a youngster at Brandy Hall. On the last occasion he beat me and then took me and showed me to his dogs. 'See, lads,' he said, 'next time this young varmint sets foot on my land, you can eat him. Now see him off.' They chased me all the way to the ferry. I have never got over the fright, though I dare say the beasts knew their business and would not really have touched me." Pippin laughed. "Well, it's time you made it up, especially if you are coming back to live in Buckland. Old Maggot is really a stout fellow, if you leave his mushrooms alone. Let's get into the lane, and then we shan't be trespassing. If we meet him, I'll do the talking. He is a friend of Mary's, and I used to come here with him a good deal at one time." They went along the lane until they saw the thatched roofs of a large house and farm buildings peeping out among the trees ahead. The Maggots, and the Pudafoots of stock, and most of the inhabitants of the Marish were house-dwellers, and this farm was stoutly built of brick and had a high wall all round it. There was a wide wooden gate opening out of the wall into the lane. Suddenly, as they drew nearer, a terrific baying and barking broke out, and a loud voice was heard shouting, "Grip! Fang! Wolf! Come on, lads!" Frodo and Sam stopped dead, but Pippin walked on a few paces. The gate opened, and 3 huge dogs came pelting out into the lane and dashed towards the travelers, barking fiercely. They took no notice of Pippin, but Sam shrank against the wall, while 2 wolfish-looking dogs sniffed at him suspiciously and snarled if he moved. The largest and most ferocious of the 3 halted in front of Frodo, bristling and growling. Through the gate there now appeared a broad, thick-set hobbit with a round red face. "Hello! Hello! And who may you be, and what may you be wanting?" he asked. "Good afternoon, Mr. Maggot," said Pippin. The farmer looked at him closely. "Well, if it isn't Master Pippin, Mr. Peregrine Took, I should say," he cried, changing from a scowl to a grin. "It's a long time since I saw you round here. It's lucky for you that I know you. I was just going out to set my dogs on any strangers. There are some funny things going on today. Of course, we do get queer folk wandering in these parts at times. Too near the river," he said, shaking his head. "But this fellow was the most outlandish I have ever set eyes on. He won't cross my land without leave a second time, not if I can stop it." "What fellow do you mean?" asked Pippin. "Well, then you haven't seen him," said the farmer. "He went up the lane towards the causeway not a long while back. He was a funny customer and asking funny questions. But perhaps you'll come along inside and we'll pass the news more comfortable. I have a drop of good ale on tap if you and your friends are willing, Mr. Took."
Well, that's a... If you
I'll
and
say
your
they
friends
are.
are willing, yeah.
Right. Have they ever not been?
Yeah.
It seemed plain that the farmer would tell them more, if allowed to do it in his own time and fashion, so they all accepted the invitation. "What about the dogs?" asked Frodo anxiously. The farmer laughed. "They won't harm you, not unless I tell them to. Here, Grip, Fang, heel!" he cried. "Heel, Wolf!" To the relief of Frodo and Sam, the dogs walked away and let them go free. Pippin introduced the other 2 to the farmer. "Mr. Frodo Baggins," he said. "You may not remember him, but he used to live at Brandy Hall." At the name Baggins, the farmer started and gave Frodo a sharp glance. For a moment, Frodo thought that the memory of stolen mushrooms had been aroused, and that the dogs would be told to see him off. But Farmer Maggot took him by the arm. "Well, if that isn't queerer than ever!" he exclaimed. "Mr. Baggins, is it? Come inside, we must have a talk." They went into the farmer's kitchen and sat by the wide fireplace. Mrs. Maggot brought out beer in a huge jug and filled 4 large mugs. It was a good brew, and Pippin found himself more than compensated for missing the golden perch. Sam sipped his beer suspiciously. He had a natural mistrust of the inhabitants of other parts of the Shire, and also he was not disposed to be quick friends with anyone who had beaten his master, however long ago. After a few remarks about the weather and the agricultural prospects, which were no worse than usual, Farmer Maggot put down his mug and looked at them all in turn. "Now, Mr. Peregrine," he said, "where might you be coming from, and where might you be going to? Were you coming to visit me? For if so, you had gone past my gate without my seeing you." "Well, no," answered Pippin. "To tell you the truth, since you have guessed it, we got into the lane from the other end. We had come over your fields, but that was quite by accident. We lost our way in the woods back near Woodhall, trying to take a shortcut to the ferry." "Well, if you were in a hurry, the road would have served you better," said the farmer. "But I wasn't worrying about that. You have leave to walk over my land if you have a mind, Mr. Peregrine. And you, Mr. Baggins, though I dare say you still like mushrooms." He laughed. "Ah, yes, I recognize the name. I recollect the time when young Frodo Baggins was one of the worst young rascals of Buckland. But it wasn't mushrooms I was thinking of. I had just heard the name Baggins before you turned up. What do you think that funny customer asked me?" They waited anxiously for him to go on. "Well," the farmer continued, approaching his point with slow relish, "he came riding on a big black horse in at the gate, which happened to be open, and right up to my door. All black he was himself, too, and cloaked and hooded up, as if he did not want to be known. Now what in the Shire can he want, I thought to myself. We don't see many of the big folk over the border, and anyway I had never heard of any like this black fellow. 'Good day to you,' I says, going out to him. 'This lane don't lead anywhere, and wherever you may be going, your quickest way will be back to the road.' I didn't like the looks of him, and when Grip came out, he took one sniff and let out a yelp as if he had been stung. He put down his tail and bolted off howling. The black fellow sat quite still. 'I come from yonder,' he said, slow and stiff-like, pointing back west. 'Over my fields, if you please.' 'Have you seen Baggins?' he asked in a queer voice, and bent down towards me. I could not see any face, for his hood fell down so low, and I felt a sort of shiver down my back. But I did not see why he should come riding over my land so bold. 'Be off,' I said. 'There are no Bagginses here. You're in the wrong part of the Shire. You'd better go back west to Hobbiton, but you can go by road this time.' 'Baggins has left,' he answered in a whisper. 'He is coming. He is not far away. I wish to find him. If he passes, will you tell me? I will come back with gold.' 'No, you won't,' I said. 'You'll go back where you belong double quick. I give you 1 minute before I call all my dogs.' And he gave a sort of hiss. It might have been laughing, and it might not. And then he spurred his great horse right at me, and I jumped out of the way only just in time. I called the dogs, but he swung off and rode through the gate and up the lane towards the causeway like a bolt of thunder. What do you think of that?" Frodo sat for a moment looking at the fire, but his only thought was how on earth would they reach the ferry. "I don't know what to think," he said at last. "Well, then I'll tell you what to think," said Maggot. "You should never have gone mixing yourself up with Hobbiton folk, Mr. Frodo. Folk are queer up there." Sam stirred in his chair and looked at the farmer with an unfriendly eye. "But you were always a reckless lad. When I heard you had left the Brandybucks and gone off to that old Mr. Bilbo, I said that you were going to find trouble. Mark my words, this all comes of those strange doings of Mr. Bilbo's. His money was got in some strange fashion in foreign parts, they say. Maybe there is some that want to know what has become of the gold and jewels that he has buried in the hill of Hobbiton, as I hear." Frodo said nothing. The shrewd guesses of the farmer were rather disconcerting. "Well, Mr. Frodo," Maggot went on, "I'm glad that you've had the sense to come back to Buckland. My advice is, stay there, and don't get mixed up with these outlandish folk. You'll have friends in these parts. If any of these black fellows come after you again, I'll deal with them. I'll say you're dead, or have left the Shire, or anything you like. And that might be true enough, for as like as not, it is old Mr. Bilbo they want news of." "Maybe you're right," said Frodo, avoiding the farmer's eye and staring at the fire. Maggot looked at him thoughtfully. "Well, I see you have ideas of your own," he said. "It is as plain as my nose that no accident brought you and that rider here on the same afternoon, and maybe my news was no great news to you after all. I'm not asking you to tell me anything you have a mind to keep to yourself, but I see you are in some kind of trouble. Perhaps you are thinking it won't be too easy to get to the ferry without being caught." "I was thinking so," said Frodo. "But we have got to try and get there, and it won't be done by sitting and thinking. So I am afraid we must be going. Thank you very much indeed for your kindness. I've been in terror of you and your dogs for over 30 years, Farmer Maggot, though you may laugh to hear it. It's a pity, for I've missed a good friend. And now I'm sorry to leave so soon, but I'll come back, perhaps, one day, if I get a chance." "You'll be welcome when you come," said Maggot. "But now I've a notion. It's near sundown already, and we're going to have our supper, for we mostly go to bed soon after the sun. If you and Mr. Peregrine and all could stay and have a bite with us, we would be pleased." "And so should we," said Frodo. "But we must be going at once, I'm afraid. Even now it will be dark before we can reach the ferry." "Ah, but wait a minute. I was going to say, after a bit of supper, I'll get out a small wagon and I'll drive you all to the ferry. That will save you a good step, and it might also save you trouble of another sort." Frodo now accepted the invitation gratefully, to the relief of Pippin and Sam. The sun was already behind the western hills, and the light was failing. 2 of Maggot's sons and his 3 daughters came in, and a generous supper was laid on the large table. The kitchen was lit with candles, and the fire was mended. Mrs. Maggot bustled in and out. 1 or 2 other hobbits belonging to the farm household came in. In a short while, 14 sat down to eat. There was beer in plenty, and a mighty dish of mushrooms and bacon, besides much other solid farmhouse fare. The dogs lay by the fire, and gnawed rinds and cracked bones.
My goodness.
I could kind of catch my breath a little bit after that one.
That was a long
reading.
passage. That was a long reading, and a hard one. It's funny, some of the exact things we talked about in the passage I chose, we get here too, that, those folk over there are really weird.
Yeah, right, exactly. Only you get the other side of it here because you get it from from Maggot as the Bucklander.
Exactly. Talk about how weird the folks over are in the Shire in
Right.
Hobbiton. Yeah.
Right. You get the other side of the whole Bilbo's riches story.
Yeah.
The gold and the jewels.
He still thinks they're gold and jewels.
Yeah.
And again, the same kind of provincial small talk about the weather and about agriculture. Very, very interesting. I did like that, here we get a little bit, we get something different than we get in Hobbiton, and that is because they're near the border, they have to be on their guard.
Yes.
And because they're also in farmland, they're not, Farmer Maggot doesn't live in a hobbit hole. He lives in a regular house.
He lives in a house, yeah.
Very
I can't help noticing that there is a wall around the house, which adds to the on their guard.
It really does. You're right. It sure does.
But
very interesting.
Yeah, you get, and I love, again, we talked about, with the last passage, we talked about this luxury of a world that's so small. Here's Frodo is as scared of Maggot as he would be of an orc. Or, well, it even says, as scared as if he was near a dragon's den, basically.
Yeah.
A farmer whose mushrooms he used to steal,
Right.
Again, it's this is the last time Frodo's going to be allowed to be this scared of a hobbit, because he's about to see some really scary things.
That is true.
But
that is definitely true.
What I really loved about this was just the home setting that we got.
Oh, I know.
Just
isn't it?
so much. This is Home and Hearth in a nutshell. This is the first thing I thought of when I learned what the theme was this year.
Yeah.
The sitting at the fireplace, beer on tap, mugs, and small talk, and just the again, you get the storytelling, the way the hobbits love gossip. Maggot tells his tale with relish.
Yeah, he couldn't just give him the news while they were standing outside. He has to bring him in, and then
this whole yarn that he spins.
What do you think that guy asked me about?
Right.
Go ahead, take a guess.
Kind of bringing him along. It's like a great storyteller.
Absolutely.
And I can't help thinking about, although we won't be reading it today, some of Tom Bombadil's comments about Maggot and how he's really a lot shrewder than Pippin and Frodo seem to think.
Yeah.
But
very perceptive. What was it? See through a brick in time or something like that?
Something like that. Yeah.
I can't remember, but the idea was being that he's got great perception.
That's
kind of the notion.
And he sure does. I mean, it's, when the Black Rider comes, it's not just that he's a big person or that he's weird or anything like that. He knows there's something up.
He can see through a brick wall in time. I was close.
There you go. Okay, that's good.
Not a brick. Just a brick wall.
I guess that makes a little more sense, but yeah.
I don't know why you'd want to see through a brick.
Right, because you could just move it and look over it.
You could just look around it. So find some other preposition to use.
But he hits really close to the mark, just guessing what the Black Rider's about. I mean, he goes straight to Bilbo's adventures and the treasure he brought back, and obviously we know that's what it is.
Dead on, man. You're righter than you think.
Yep.
It's interesting because he views Frodo as a Bucklander.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants to view somebody that they like. They want to view him as their own. So
as their own kind.
In Hobbiton, they viewed Frodo as a Hobbiton hobbit.
But out here, that's true. Maggot views Frodo as a Bucklander. It's like, why'd you go out and hang out with those Hobbiton folk?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you see more, kind of associating with his own kind. Pippin has free reign. He's free to walk over his land anytime he wants.
He doesn't even mention Sam.
He doesn't even address Sam.
If you and Frodo and the rest can hang out.
And the rest.
It's like, it's just
Meanwhile,
Sam.
the rest is over there nursing his beer, looking suspiciously.
Yeah.
That's great.
And smelling it to make sure it's not poisoned.
Yeah, right.
I've been spending a lifetime building up an immunity to iocane powder.
Inconceivable. Yeah, it's great. And,
it really is.
I love, and to think of Frodo having spent his whole life afraid of this guy.
Oh, I know.
And he's such a stout fellow. He's such a nice guy and so generous with his home and his food and his time, his wagon. I mean,
I know. He's going to risk. I mean, come on. I wouldn't want to even risk the chance that I'm going to run into that Black Rider again.
Right, exactly.
And yet he's willing to take that chance.
Yeah, this is big help that he's about to give them, and it's just so cool.
It really is.
You see so much. Despite the parochialism, there's a real strong sense of community within the community that they can agree upon. And
exactly. I don't think he'd help Sam, but he would help Frodo because he sees him as a Bucklander.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Well, we're going to fast forward a little bit to the Council of Elrond. We're going to get almost to the very end of the chapter. In fact, the portion that I'm going to read is the last part of the chapter. And it's going to pick up after they've really kind of come to a decision, but haven't quite yet finalized it. So here we go. Thus we return once more to the destroying of the ring, said Erestor, and yet we come no nearer. What strength have we for the finding of the fire in which it was made? That is the path of despair. Of folly, I would say, if the long wisdom of Elrond did not forbid me. Despair, or folly, said Gandalf. It is not despair, for despair is only for those who see the end beyond all doubt. We do not. It is wisdom to recognize necessity when all other courses have been weighed, though as folly it may appear to those who cling to false hope. Well, let folly be our cloak, a veil before the eyes of the enemy, for he is very wise, and weighs all things to a nicety in the scales of his malice. But the only measure that he knows is desire for power, and so he judges all hearts. Into his heart the thought will not enter that any will refuse it, that having the ring we may seek to destroy it. If we seek this, we shall put him out of reckoning. At least for a while, said Elrond. The road must be trod, but it will be very hard, and neither strength nor wisdom will carry us far upon it. This quest may be attempted by the weak with as much hope as the strong. Yet such is oft the course of deeds that move the wheels of the world. Small hands do them because they must, while the eyes of the great are elsewhere. Very well, Master Elrond, said Bilbo suddenly. Say no more. It is plain enough what you're pointing at. Bilbo the silly hobbit started this affair, and Bilbo had better finish it, or himself. I was very comfortable here, and getting on with my book. If you want to know, I'm just writing an ending for it. I had thought of putting, and he lived happily ever afterwards to the end of his days. It is a good ending, none the worse for having been used before. Now I shall have to alter that. Doesn't look like coming true. And anyway, there will evidently have to be several more chapters if I live to write them. It is a frightful nuisance. When ought I to start? Boromir looked in surprise at Bilbo, but the laughter died on his lips when he saw that all the others regarded the old hobbit with grave respect. Only Glóin smiled, but his smile came from old memories. Of course, my dear Bilbo, said Gandalf. If you had really started this affair, you might be expected to finish it. But you know well enough now that starting is too great a claim for any, and that only a small part is played in great deeds by any hero. You need not bow, though the word was meant, and we do not doubt that under jest you are making a valiant offer. But one beyond your strength, Bilbo. You cannot take this thing back. It has passed on. If you need my advice any longer, I should say that your part is ended, unless as a recorder. Finish your book, and leave the ending unaltered. There is still hope for it, but get ready to write a sequel when they come back. Bilbo laughed. I've never known you give me pleasant advice before, he said. As all your unpleasant advice has been good, I wonder if this advice is not bad. Still, I don't suppose I have the strength or luck left to deal with the ring. It has grown, and I have not. But tell me, what do you mean by they? The messengers who are sent with the ring. Exactly, and who are they to be? That seems to me what this council has to decide, and all that it has to decide. Elves may thrive on speech alone, and dwarves endure great weariness, but I am only an old hobbit, and I miss my meal at noon. Can't we think of some names now? Or put it off until after dinner? No one answered. The noon bell rang. Still no one spoke. Frodo glanced at all the faces, but they were not turned to him. All the council sat with downcast eyes, as if in deep thought. A great dread fell on him, as if he was awaiting the pronouncement of some doom that he had long foreseen, and vainly hoped might after all never be spoken. An overwhelming longing to rest and remain at peace by Bilbo's side in Rivendell filled all his heart. At last, with an effort, he spoke, and wondered to hear his own words, as if some other will was using his small voice. I will take the ring, he said, though I do not know the way. Elrond raised his eyes and looked at him, and Frodo felt his heart pierced by the sudden keenness of the glance. If I understand aright all that I have heard, he said, I think that this task is appointed for you, Frodo, and that if you do not find a way, no one will. This is the hour of the Shire folk, when they arise from their quiet fields to shake the towers and councils of the great. Who of all the wise could have foreseen it? Or if they are wise, why should they expect to know it until the hour has struck? But it is a heavy burden, so heavy that none could lay it on another. I do not lay it on you. But if you take it freely, I will say that your choice is right. And though all the mighty elf friends of old, Hador and Húrin and Túrin and Beren himself were assembled together, your seat should be among them. But you won't send him off alone, surely, master, cried Sam, unable to contain himself any longer, and jumping up from the corner where he had been quietly sitting on the floor. No, indeed, said Elrond, turning towards him with a smile. You at least shall go with him. It is hardly possible to separate you from him, even when he is summoned to a secret council, and you are not. Sam sat down, blushing and muttering. A nice pickle we've landed ourselves in, Mr. Frodo, he said, shaking his head.
Man, that's a great passage.
Isn't it? I mean, it speaks so much of what hobbits are, and it is this an immeasurable bravery. You know, this beyond their scale. I mean, they're smaller than a dwarf. Bilbo is like, fine. I get the hint.
Yeah, willing to accept this, this terrible burden.
Oh, unbelievable burden.
And, and he kind of grouses about it a little bit. But, but he's willing to do it.
Bilbo's earned the right to grouse a little bit at this
Certainly,
point.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me, though, the way he groused about it made me think of spots in The Hobbit that we've seen where he's like, he knew his duty, and no matter how painful, stuck to it. This is he sees this as his duty because he feels like he started it. It's just it speaks to this sense of responsibility, this sense of nobility, even amongst these little hobbits.
Yeah, I think even though they're out of their element, they really don't belong in this place at this council with, I mean, they do because of events, but,
they're really out of their league other than that.
They really, exactly, that's
Glorfindel's at this table, right?
Right, exactly, yeah.
Elrond.
Yeah.
And here's little Bilbo.
You killed a
and Frodo.
Balrog, dude, and you're hanging out with Bilbo, and
Yeah, pretty amazing.
Truly movers and shakers in Middle-earth
Exactly,
history.
seriously. Some of them going back to the First Age, so let's just, definitely being here is a lot, but actually being
Yeah.
able to speak up and say, I'll do this is
Yeah.
just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I did think it was interesting, and was the fact that Bilbo finally recognized this is beyond him. He listened to Gandalf.
Yeah.
I mean, he kind of had a little snark for him, but
Well, that's just old friends, you know.
that's old
There's
friends
something
bickering
really
a little
cool
bit. I love it.
Yeah.
It's wonderful stuff. But I do think that his understanding that, hey, you know what, Gandalf makes a good point. And I think he does realize that this is beyond him now.
Yeah.
But I love above all of that, I love that he's like, that's great, and we need to make that decision, but can we eat
Can we eat first, please? Still a hobbit after all of it. He may be here at this high table, this high council with all these, the wise
deciding
and
matters
the brave.
that will determine the survival of the
fate
world.
the fate of the world.
But
It's
we need lunch.
Can we eat? Seriously, I'm starving.
Yeah. I mean, that's awesome.
All I had was a Snickers bar.
Seriously.
And that was hours ago.
I am getting hungry.
And right. And then, sure enough, Bilbo's not the only one who's got the bravery.
No.
Is he? Frodo steps up.
Frodo comes up. But I will notice, we've talked a lot about luck and fate and free will and all of that. And there's some references to that here. First off, I noticed that Bilbo says, I don't suppose I have the strength or luck left to deal with the ring. It's almost as if he realizes, I had a finite amount, and I think I might have spent it all.
I've used it all up. Yeah.
And he's probably right. But, Frodo here, this notion that he wondered to hear his own words as if some other will was using his small voice.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We've seen that kind of inspiration before in the Silmarillion.
We have.
I think I did a Prancing Pony Pondering on it once.
Yeah.
It happens a lot.
When Tuor ends up speaking the words of Ulmo to, who does he end up speaking to? It's at the after the last gate, so it's not Turgon yet, but
it's Ecthelion.
It's Ecthelion, yeah. Man, what a moment that is. And it's the same kind of thing here. This is Frodo being
and
guided.
Baron to Thingol too, if I recall correctly. Baron has
that's
has a
true.
moment where he speaks.
Baron to Thingol, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely right. And this is
all
another
these moments
similar
of important, very important,
crucial to the plan.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. These are all central to the completion of the plan of Iluvatar.
Yeah. And Elrond's wise enough to see it. I mean, he says, I think this task is appointed to you.
And in
Frodo.
fact, that whole passage is, to me, the kind of the proof of that whole balance of fate and free will. I mean, this task is appointed for you, but then the next paragraph, this can't be laid on anybody. I don't lay it, but if you take it freely, then your choice is right.
Right.
There's just no better way to point it out than to look at that very short segment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and you see Elrond saying, this has been appointed for you, but you still have to choose it. That's right. Mm-hmm. That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I love the mention of the elf friends. Oh, that's so cool. That just gives me chills.
It's a great line. That's one of those textual ruins that, when you first read this, it's a textual ruin. Obviously, with the hindsight of the Silmarillion, you now know who these people are, and it's so cool to know who those people are.
I know. Those textual ruins, I love them.
Yeah.
And I love even Sam's courage at the end. He doesn't know. It's an ignorant courage in a way, but it's a willing courage regardless.
Right, yeah.
He knows he doesn't know, but he doesn't care because he doesn't want to be away from Frodo.
Right, exactly. He just doesn't want Frodo to go alone. He doesn't have to understand these things. His motivation is much smaller.
It is. It is much, much smaller, but it's still just as pure and just
as
brave.
But it will get bigger before the end.
Well, we'll read some of that, actually, yeah.
And we will, but he's still, it's amazing how much he's still always thinking of Frodo, isn't it?
He is. Yeah, he always is. That's very much Sam's role, and I love it. It's a devotion. It's a deep devotion born out of an admiration and
just a true love and admiration for his friend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, well, I think next up is you reading something from Book 3, Chapter 9.
We're moving on to Two Towers. Yep, Chapter 9 of Book 3, Flotsam and Jetsam.
Ah, yes.
The reunion of some old friends here. Aragorn and his companions sat themselves down at one end of a long table, and the hobbits disappeared through one of the inner doors. "Storeroom in there, and above the floods, luckily," said Pippin, as they came back laden with dishes, bowls, cups, knives, and food of various sorts. "And you need not turn up your nose at the provender, Master Gimli," said Merry. "This is not orc stuff, but man food, as Treebeard calls it. Will you have wine or beer? There's a barrel inside there, very passable. And this is first-rate salted pork. Or I can cut you some rashers of bacon and broil them if you like.
I'll take some.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I knew you would.
Whoa, yeah.
I knew you would.
We're all over that.
I'm sorry there's no green stuff. The deliveries have been rather interrupted in the last few days. I cannot offer you anything to follow but butter and honey for your bread. Are you content?
Indeed, yes, said Gimli. The score is much reduced.
The three were soon busy with their meal, and the two hobbits, unabashed, set to a second time. We must keep our guests company, they said. You are full of courtesy this morning, laughed Legolas. But maybe if we had not arrived, you would already have been keeping one another company again. Maybe, and why not, said Pippin. We had foul fare with the orcs, and little enough for days before that. It seems a long while since we could eat to heart's content. It does not seem to have done you any harm, said Aragorn. Indeed, you look in the bloom of health.
Aye, you do indeed,
said Gimli, looking them up and down over the top of his cup.
Why, your hair is twice as thick and curly as when we parted, and I would swear that you have both grown somewhat, if that is possible for hobbits of your age. This Treebeard, at any rate, has not starved you.
He is not, said Merry. But Ents only drink, and drink is not enough for content. Treebeard's draughts may be nourishing, but one feels the need of something solid, and even Lembas is none the worse for a change. You've drunk the waters of the Ents, have you? Said Legolas. Ah, then I think it is likely that Gimli's eyes do not deceive him. Strange songs have been sung of the draughts of Fangorn. Many strange tales have been told about that land, said Aragorn. I have never entered it. Come, tell me more about it, and about the Ents. Ents, said Pippin. Ents are all different, for one thing. But their eyes are very odd. He tried a few fumbling words that trailed off into silence. Oh well, he went on, you have seen some at a distance already. They saw you at any rate, and reported that you were on the way. And you will see many others, I expect, before you leave here. You must form your own ideas.
Now, said Gimli, we are beginning the story in the middle. I should like a tale in the right order, starting with that strange day when our fellowship was broken.
You shall have it if there is time, said Merry. But first, if you have finished eating, you shall fill your pipes and light up. And then for a little while we can pretend that we are all back safe at Bree again, or in Rivendell. He produced a small leather bag full of tobacco. We have heaps of it, he said, and you can all pack as much as you wish when we go. We did some salvage work this morning, Pippin and I. There are lots of things floating about. It was Pippin who found 2 small barrels, washed up out of some cellar or storehouse, I suppose. When we opened them, we found they were filled with this, as fine a pipeweed as you could wish for, and quite unspoiled. Gimli took some and rubbed it in his palms and sniffed it.
It feels good, and it smells good, he said.
It is good, said Merry. My dear Gimli, it is Longbottom leaf. There were the hornblower brand marks on the barrels, as plain as plain. How it came here, I can't imagine. For Saruman's private use, I fancy. I never knew that it went so far abroad, but it comes in handy now.
It would, said Gimli, if I had a pipe to go with it. Alas, I lost mine in Moria, or before. Is there no pipe in all your plunder?
No, I am afraid not, said Merry. We have not found any, not even here in the guard-rooms. Saruman kept this dainty to himself, it seems. And I don't think it would be any use knocking on the doors of Orthanc to beg a pipe of him. We shall have to share pipes, as good friends must at a pinch. Half a moment, said Pippin. Putting his hand inside the breast of his jacket, he pulled out a little soft wallet on a string. I keep a treasure or two near my skin, as precious as rings to me. Here's one, my old wooden pipe. And here's another, an unused one. I've carried it a long way, though I don't know why. I never really expected to find any pipeweed on the journey when my own ran out, but now it comes in useful after all. He held up a small pipe with a wide, flattened bowl, and handed it to Gimli. Does that settle the score between us? He said.
Settle it, cried Gimli. Most noble hobbit, it leaves me deep in your debt.
Well, I am going back into the open air to see what the wind and sky are doing, said Legolas. We will come with you, said Aragorn. They went out and seated themselves upon the piled stones before the gateway. They could see far down into the valley now. The mists were lifting and floating away upon the breeze. Now let us take our ease here for a little, said Aragorn. We will sit on the edge of ruin and talk, as Gandalf says, while he is busy elsewhere. I feel a weariness such as I have seldom felt before." He wrapped his gray cloak about him, hiding his mail shirt, and stretched out his long legs. Then he lay back and sent from his lips a thin stream of smoke. "Look," said Pippin, "Strider the Ranger has come back." "He has never been away," said Aragorn. "I am Strider and Dunedain too, and I belong both to Gondor and the North."
Wonderful.
I love that scene. It's just such a fun...
It really
It's
is.
such a fun reunion of the friends. You know, there's, when you think about the book that they've had, going back to chapter 1 of Two Towers, you know, Aragorn starting out feeling like he can't do anything right.
Yeah,
You know,
whatever decision he
what's
makes,
the-
it's going to be the wrong one.
Yeah, what's the line he has? You know, all that I do goes amiss, and ill
Yeah.
fate is on me this day, and all that I do goes amiss. He starts out in a really bad place. Merry and Pippin have been through, you know, they were captured by Uruk-hai. They were, you know...
Force-fed that terrible
the terrible
medicine
orc
liquor
stuff.
thing.
Yeah, it's been a rough time for these guys.
Just a bit.
And to see them all back together and just able to have a little bit of homey comfort here in this wrecked ruin of Isengard.
And leave it to the hobbits to do exactly that.
Leave it to the hobbits to find
a homey
it. Exactly.
setting. Yeah.
They find the hominess in this foreign place. Mm-hmm. And
that's a hobbit thing right there. Absolutely.
It is. And they get to this point, you know, you see early on that they're now celebrating passable beer. Once upon a time, passable probably would not have been good enough. But now passable is something to celebrate. But hey, first-rate salted pork. You know,
that's always a plus.
Mary's they're just in such good spirits, you know.
Yeah.
And I love Mary's humor about, you know, the deliveries have been rather interrupted.
You think just a little bit.
Kind of love that.
And then the hints that they're growing from the ant drafts, and there's just a lot here.
Yeah, Legolas knows, you know, he's heard about the ant drafts.
He knows the power of that water, absolutely.
Yeah, but leave it to a hobbit to realize that although they may be nourishing, they're not satisfying.
That's true. Well, and also leave it to a hobbit to carry a second pipe. I love that. I mean, what a moment that is. And he's generous enough to give it up, too.
Right, and at first, you know, it would have been, hey, friends will share pipes, but hey, Pippin's got one, and here, you can have it.
Yeah, you can have your own.
And so here they enjoy this little, you know, a true taste of home, you know, some long bottom leaf. And I love the last line of this. Fortunately, this is kind of a short passage, so there's not as much to say about it. But I love the last line of this. You know, you really see this sort of this restorative effect it has on Aragorn.
Yes, you do. You're right.
That's just, it's so cool. Again, thinking about where Aragorn came from at the beginning of Two Towers and seeing where he is now, it's like, he's exhausted, and he's able to relax a little bit. And I think that's cool. And like you said,
I think he
leave
feels
it to
like
the
he's
hobbits to find
accomplished. That's true.
Yeah, that's true.
He's accomplished something here. You know, now they're reunited. They may not be able to do anything about you know, Frodo and Sam, and Gandalf's away, but and certainly they can't do anything about Boromir now. But
right. But they've at least accomplished this. Yeah.
Yes, they have rescued the two hobbits. So,
yep.
Good stuff. Wow, we're kind of running a little long, but we'll try to keep it on target here. I'm going to go ahead and read from The Two Towers, Book 4, Chapter 10, The Choices of Master Samwise. This is near, but not quite, the very end of The Two Towers. And I'm going to be picking up right after he's stabbed Shelob and believes that Frodo's dead. When at last the blackness passed, Sam looked up and shadows were about him. But for how many minutes or hours the world had gone dragging on, he could not tell. He was still in the same place, and still his master lay beside him, dead. The mountains had not crumbled, nor the earth fallen into ruin. "What shall I do? What shall I do?" he said. "Did I come all this way with him for nothing?" And then he remembered his own voice speaking words that at the time he did not understand himself, at the beginning of their journey. "I have something to do before the end. I must see it through, sir, if you understand." "But what can I do? Not leave Mr. Frodo dead, unburied on the top of the mountains, and go home." "Oh, go on? Go on," he repeated, and for a moment doubt and fear shook him. "Go on? Is that what I've got to do? And leave him?" Then at last he began to weep, and going to Frodo he composed his body, and folded his cold hands upon his breast, and wrapped his cloak about him, and he laid his own sword at one side and the staff that Faramir had given at the other. "If I'm to go on," he said, "then I must take your sword by your leave, Mr. Frodo. But I'll put this one to lie by you, as it lay by the old king in the barrow. And you got your beautiful mithril coat from old Mr. Bilbo. And your star-glass, Mr. Frodo, you did lend it to me, and I'll need it, for I'll always be in the dark now. It's too good for me, and the lady gave it to you, but maybe she'd understand. Do you understand, Mr. Frodo? I've got to go on." But he could not go. Not yet. He knelt and held Frodo's hand and could not release it. And time went by, and still he knelt, holding his master's hand, and in his heart keeping a debate. Now he tried to find strength to tear himself away and go on a lonely journey for vengeance. If once he could go, his anger would bear him down all the roads of the world, pursuing until he had him at last, Gollum. Then Gollum would die in a corner. But that was not what he had set out to do. It would not be worthwhile to leave his master for that. It would not bring him back. Nothing would. They had better both be dead together, and that, too, would be a lonely journey. He looked on the bright point of the sword. He thought of the places behind where there was a black brink and an empty fall into nothingness. There was no escape that way. That was to do nothing, not even to grieve. That was not what he had set out to do. "What am I to do, then?" he cried again. And now he seemed plainly to know the hard answer. See it through. Another lonely journey, and the worst. What? Me alone go to the Crack-a-Doom and all? He quailed still, but the resolve grew. What? Me take the ring from him? A council gave it to him. But the answer came at once. And the council gave him companions so that the errand should not fail. And you are the last of all the company. The errand must not fail. I wish I wasn't the last, he groaned. I wish old Gandalf was here or somebody. Why am I left all alone to make up my mind? I'm sure to go wrong. And it's not for me to go taking the ring, putting myself forward. But you haven't put yourself forward, you've been put forward. As for not being the right and proper person, why, Mr. Frodo wasn't, as you might say, nor Mr. Bilbo. They didn't choose themselves. Oh, well, I must make up my own mind. I will make it up, but I'll be sure to go wrong. That'd be Sam Gamgee all over. Let me see now. If we're found here, or Mr. Frodo's found and that thing's on him, well, the enemy will get it. And that's the end of all of us, of Lorien and Rivendell and the Shire and all. And there's no time to lose, or it'll be the end anyway. The war's begun, and more than likely things are all going the enemy's way already. No chance to go back with it and get advice or permission. No, it's sit here till they come and kill me over Master's body and gets it, or take it and go. He drew a deep breath. Then take it is. He stooped. Very gently he undid the clasp at the neck and slipped his hand inside Frodo's tunic. Then with his other hand raising the head, he kissed the cold forehead and softly drew the chain over it. And then the head lay quietly back again in rest. No change came over the still face, and by that, more than by all other tokens, Sam was convinced at last that Frodo had died and laid aside the quest. Goodbye, Master, my dear, he murmured. Forgive you, Sam. He'll come back to this spot when the job's done if he manages it, and then he'll not leave you again. Rest you quiet till I come, and may no foul creature come anigh you. And if the lady could hear me and give me one wish, I would wish to come back and find you again. Goodbye. And then he bent his own neck and put the chain upon it, and at once his head was bowed to the ground with the weight of the ring, as if a great stone had been strung on him. But slowly, as if the weight became less or new strength grew in him, he raised his head, and then with a great effort got to his feet and found that he could walk and bear his burden. And for a moment he lifted up the phial and looked down at his master, and the light burned gently now with the soft radiance of the evening star in summer. And in that light Frodo's face was fair of hue again, pale but beautiful with an elvish beauty, as of one who has long passed the shadows. And with the bitter comfort of that last sight, Sam turned and hid the light and stumbled on into the growing dark. Oh, man.
Man, what a powerful scene.
It really is. It's a heart. Just,
It is. It's, yeah. I know there's a few things we would love to talk about there. I just want to say we finally are reminded who the true hero of the story is.
yes.
Eärendil, right there, the evening star in summer. Just got to say it. Got to put it out there.
Oh,
Shout
my
out to Eärendil.
goodness. Nice try. Good one.
No,
well played, sir. Well played.
Thank you very much. I read this before and I didn't even notice it, and just hearing you read it just now, I was like, oh wait, there's Eärendil. I got to give a shout out to my man Eärendil up there in his boat.
You do, yeah. Up there on his boat.
Or here in his vial, I guess, in this particular case. But
there you go.
yeah. Anyway.
Oh, what an absolutely! I'm glad you did that, because that moment's so heavy. With
We needed a little bit of levity to kind of
I agree.
get us back to our
Yeah.
make us ourselves again after
Because,
that.
man, I mean, reading that brings tears to my eyes. I mean, Sam's
with good
heart,
reason,
it just
yeah.
aches, you hurt for him so bad. Mm-hmm. I remember the first time I've told you that, my wife and I read these books together. For me, it was like the dozenth time, and for her, it was her first time about a year before the movies came out. When we had gotten to Gandalf's death, she was just bawling, and I tried. I didn't spoil it for her, I let her suffer.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
And so she was joyful when we found Gandalf again. But when this happened, she absolutely had to know whether he was dead. She was like, "No, tell me, Frodo's not dead." She was like, "You have to tell me. I will not go any further unless you tell me."
So you had to break it to her.
I had to break it to her. I was like, "Yeah." So yeah, he's still alive. But in that case, we didn't have to wait very long
it's
to
only
find
a
out.
few pages before you know better. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I really, the stuff he does, like composing Frodo's body, this respect and this love, and
he takes Sting, he takes Galadriel's vial, and he's apologizing for it.
Oh yeah, he wishes he didn't have to do that. Like, I really don't want to do that, and it's too good for me. But
yeah, it kind of reminds me of his behavior at the Council of Elrond. This is all too big for me, but I need to do this.
Yeah,
I
agree. One thing I don't know that I've noticed until maybe a few read-throughs ago, I don't know that I ever realized that he was pondering suicide as an option.
Yeah. He was. I mean, I don't know how seriously, but he definitely, it was an option. It was
I was thinking about
he
was, he was afraid of going back and like falling off those ledges, and then he was thinking about jumping off.
Yeah,
one of
he's
those
thinking
ledges
about
or
jumping off.
falling
He's
on the
looking at-
sword. Yeah.
He's looking at the point of the sword. He's and then he's thinking of going back to the brink and jumping. Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty heavy. But I love that in both that and the Revenge of Killing Gollum, there's a very and Tolkien does this every once in a while. When he does, pay attention.
The repetition.
The
of
repetition.
The line. Yeah.
That is not what he had set out to do.
Yep.
And it made me think of everything from.
I just picked up on that hearing you read it just now.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when it happens, catch on.
Yep.
Like when Fingolfin went to challenge Morgoth, we get Morgoth came, and we get it
Morgoth
again.
came.
And the same thing with Grond as it approaches Minas Tirith. We get the same line twice. So it's when those things happen, they're really framing very important moments, very critical moments.
And I think we talked about with Fingolfin and Morgoth, it was almost like stopping time. You almost
you're right.
see the whatever happens between the two occurrences, it's almost like
it's
going
like a
back
frame.
to that moment.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine that, obviously Sam is going through two very different thought processes here: revenge against Gollum and then possible suicide. But it's happening very quickly.
You're right. It is.
And that's why I don't think he thought about it too seriously. But it is just kind of like a split second, and then he just kind of moves on. And you got to wonder if Tolkien must have known soldiers in the Great War that,
I'm sure. Yeah.
Talked about
Even if
this
he didn't
or
know them
done it,
directly, he knew of it happening.
Yeah. But,
They're absolutely right. My goodness. But, in terms of Hobbity stuff, I mean, it's just this deep love that he has and this hesitation to try to step up, he has to have the debate. He has to really reason it through. And for him, part of it is his role as an inferior. He's the servant.
Yeah. He's got such a strong sense of place. He does. He's not sure that he's allowed to step up and do this.
Yeah.
Take the ring.
It makes sense. He
continue the
probably
quest.
read of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, where he was just listed as his manservant. Frodo and his manservant.
Where Frodo gets like one mention, and he's just...
He's just the servant or manservant or
Well,
whatever.
even back in the Shire, he was just, and all the rest.
Yeah,
you know.
all the rest,
So.
yeah.
Poor Sam.
I know. That's why I love Faramir's line about how, their gardeners must be held in high honor. One of my favorite lines.
It is a great line.
But yeah, his role is this kind of inferior, right, as a lower class, as the servant. He doesn't have the right to do this. The council didn't put it on him to do this. But he realizes when he thinks it through, there is no choice. If I don't do this...
If he doesn't do it, then they're going to find...
they'll kill me.
The orcs are going to find the ring. Yeah.
Which
the
is
orcs are going
fine,
to find the ring on Frodo.
But they're going to find the ring.
Here,
right.
And they're going to destroy everything.
Yeah.
The whole thing is pointless then.
Right, exactly. So he makes the promise to Frodo, and then I love how the new strength rises in him.
Yeah.
That is Hobbit right there.
Hobbits are good at that. They're good at that.
Hidden
mustering
strength.
that strength when they need to. Yeah.
Hidden strength, yeah. That they are just, man, there's a lot to be said about them.
Mm-hmm.
Tough and what was it, dowdy at bay, This is more, less of that physical courage and more of just this emotional or volitional courage, really. This is just willing himself.
The determination to do what needs to be done.
That's the word, determination.
Even if it's unpleasant.
And even if he thinks it's simply not going to succeed. Because the alternative is a guaranteed not success. And that comes back to Gandalf, who talks about despair is only for those who see the end beyond all. If you see the end beyond all doubt, then you can despair. But we don't see the end beyond all doubt.
But we don't do that. We don't see it.
And neither does Sam. Sam does not give in to despair.
Right.
And that's something I absolutely admire about him.
Okay, so my next passage, I'm not skipping ahead too much. I'm going
much.
The very next time we see, I'm skipping a whole book, I guess, but I'm skipping ahead to the very next time we see Sam. And so this is when Sam is really, it's just crossing into Mordor for the first time, and looking out across the land in front of him, and his reaction to it, and something very Hobbity there. So
yes, there is.
I'll go ahead and start here. Hard and cruel and bitter was the land that met his gaze. Before his feet, the highest ridge of the Ephel-Duath fell steeply in great cliffs down into a dark trough, on the further side of which there rose another ridge, much lower, its edge notched and jagged with crags like fangs that stood out black against the red light behind them. It was the grim Morgai, the inner ring of the fences of the land. Far beyond it, but almost straight ahead, across a wide lake of darkness dotted with tiny fires, there was a great burning glow, and from it rose in huge columns a swirling smoke, dusty red at the roots, black above where it merged into the billowing canopy that roofed in all the accursed land. Sam was looking at Barad-dûr, the mountain of fire. Ever and anon the furnaces far below its ashen cone would grow hot, and with a great surging and throbbing pour forth rivers of molten rock from chasms in its sides. Some would flow blazing towards Barad-dûr down great channels. Some would wind their way into the stony plain until they cooled and lay like twisted dragon shapes, vomited from the tormented earth. In such an hour of labor Sam beheld Mount Doom, and the light of it, cut off by the high screen of the Ephel-Duath from those who climbed up the path from the west, now glared against the stark rock faces, so that they seemed to be drenched with blood. In that dreadful light Sam stood aghast, for now, looking to his left, he could see the tower of Cirith Ungol in all its strength. The horn that he had seen from the other side was only its topmost turret. Its eastern face stood up in 3 great tiers from a shelf in the mountain wall far below. Its back was to a great cliff behind, from which it jutted out in pointed bastions, one above the other, diminishing as they rose, with sheer sides of cunning masonry that looked northeast and southeast. About the lowest tier, 200 feet below where Sam now stood, there was a battlemented wall enclosing a narrow court. Its gate, upon the near southeastern side, opened on a broad road, the outer parapet of which ran upon the brink of a precipice, until it turned southward and went winding down into the darkness to join the road that came over the Morgul Pass. Then on it went through a jagged rift in the Morgai, out into the valley of Gorgoroth, and away to Barad-dûr. The narrow upper way on which Sam stood leapt swiftly down by stair and steep path to meet the main road under the frowning walls, close to the tower gate. As he gazed at it, suddenly Sam understood, almost with a shock, that this stronghold had been built not to keep enemies out of Mordor, but to keep them in. It was indeed one of the works of Gondor long ago, an eastern outpost of the defenses of Ithilien, made when, after the last alliance, men of Westerness kept watch on the evil land of Sauron where his creatures still lurked. But as with Narcost and Carcost, the Towers of the Teeth, so here too the vigilance had failed, and treachery had yielded up the tower to the Lord of the Ringwraiths, and now for long years it had been held by evil things. Since his return to Mordor, Sauron had found it useful, for he had few servants but many slaves of fear, and still its chief purpose as of old was to prevent escape from Mordor. Though if an enemy were so rash as to try to enter that land secretly, then it was also a last unsleeping guard against any that might pass the vigilance of Morgul and of Shelob. Only too clearly Sam saw how hopeless it would be for him to creep down under those many-eyed walls and pass the watchful gate. And even if he did so, he could not go far on the guarded road beyond. Not even the black shadows, lying deep where the red glow could not reach, would shield him long from the night-eyed orcs. But desperate as that road might be, his task was now far worse. Not to avoid the gate and escape, but to enter it, alone. His thought turned to the ring, but there was no comfort there, only dread and danger. No sooner had he come in sight of Mount Doom, burning far away, than he was aware of a change in his burden. As it drew near the great furnaces where, in the deeps of time, it had been shaped and forged, the ring's power grew, and it became more fell, untamable save by some mighty will. As Sam stood there, even though the ring was not on him, but hanging by its chain about his neck, he felt himself enlarged, as if he were robed in a huge, distorted shadow of himself. A vast and ominous threat halted upon the walls of Mordor. He felt that he had from now on only two choices: to forbear the ring, though it would torment him, or to claim it, and challenge the power that sat in its dark hold beyond the Valley of Shadows. Already the ring tempted him, gnawing at his will and reason. Wild fantasies arose in his mind, and he saw Samwise the Strong, hero of the age, striding with a flaming sword across the darkened land, and armies flocking to his call as he marched to the overthrow of Barad-dûr. And then all the clouds rolled away, and the white sun shone, and at his command the Vale of Gorgoroth became a garden of flowers and trees and brought forth fruit. He had only to put on the ring and claim it for his own, and all this could be. In that hour of trial it was the love of his master that helped most to hold him firm, but also deep down in him lived still unconquered his plain hobbit sense. He knew in the core of his heart that he was not large enough to bear such a burden, even if such visions were not a mere cheat to betray him. The one small garden of a free gardener was all his need and due, not a garden swollen to a realm, his own hands to use, not the hands of others to command. And anyway, all these notions are only a trick, he said to himself. He'd spot me and cow me before I could so much as shout out. He'd spot me pretty quick if I put the ring on now in Mordor. Well, all I can say is, things look as hopeless as a frost in spring. Just when being invisible would be really useful, I can't use the ring. And if ever I get any further, it's going to be nothing but a drag and a burden every step. So what's to be done? He was not really in any doubt. He knew that he must go down to the gate and not linger any more. With a shrug of his shoulders, as if to shake off the shadow and dismiss the phantoms, he began slowly to descend. With each step, he seemed to diminish. He had not gone far before he had shrunk again to a very small and frightened hobbit. He was now passing under the very walls of the tower, and the cries and sounds of fighting could be heard with his unaided ears. At the moment, the noise seemed to be coming from the court behind the outer wall.
Wow.
You know, I started with that very long description of Mordor just because it's his response to that is what's so interesting to me. This sort of hobbitishness, this hard, cruel, bitter, dead land that he sees. Some of the words that are used to describe it. And it's a prison. It's built to keep Sauron slaves in.
Exactly.
And there's nothing comfortable. There's nothing homey. There's nothing alive or hobbitish or happy about this place at all. And so Sam's temptation is not only to be Samwise the Strong, hero of the age, and to conquer Barad-dûr, but then to turn all this land into a garden. Yeah. And make it, his temptation is to make this awful place more like his home. Yeah. It's so neat. We hear about things like the ring gives power and it tempts each according to,
Yeah, to their
I'm trying to
stature
remember.
and to their
Yeah, that's the word I'm thinking of. Yeah.
yeah.
And you see how small Sam really is. You know, all he wants to do is he just wants to make this place a beautiful garden.
Yep.
Because that's what he values.
That is what.
And in the
that's
end,
right.
and in the end, it's his love for Frodo and his simple Hobbit sense that kind of bring him back to reality and remind him, no, you know, all I need is one small garden. You know,
I love that line.
Small
The small garden
of
of a free gardener.
Yeah.
Not a garden swollen to a realm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's realistic too. You know, he recognizes,
yeah.
look, this is who am I kidding? I mean, the second I put this thing on here, he's going to spot me. I mean, I'm in his territory now. And sure, it'd be nice to be invisible, but pretty useless. He's going to spot me right away. So he knows better. And that's Hobbit sense.
Yep, very much so. And one thing I think about as I read this, and it's something I want to look at when we get to Lord of the Rings, but I'm speculating a little bit here, but I'm trying to remember, you know, is the Shire's specialness in part defined by contrast with a place like Mordor? You know, you see that very clearly here. You start to wonder, you know, if every place was the same as the Shire, the way Sam wants to make Mordor, would the Shire still be special?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would be to the hobbits, but yeah, I see what
That's
you mean.
true. Yeah, because it would be home. But yeah.
That makes sense. That's an interesting question. My goodness, I know we're already running long, and so folks, I'd say we apologize, but I know most people are going to like it. Don't get used to it is better what I should say instead of I apologize.
I hope they like it.
Yeah, this is Tolkien Reading Day, and we still are going to have a question in Bartleman's bag, but we are going to try to stick back to our usual hour and a half, hour 35 if we can. But we're already almost there, so we'll wrap up with this last reading, and then we'll move on. I'm going to go ahead and read from Book 6, Chapter 9, The Grey Havens. I mean, I'm reading from the very end of the book, though I am actually starting at the beginning of the chapter. The clearing up certainly needed a lot of work, but it took less time than Sam had feared. The day after the battle, Frodo rode to Mickle Delving and released the prisoners from the lockholes. One of the first that they found was poor Fredegar Bolger, fatty no longer. He had been taken when the ruffians smoked out a band of rebels that he led from their hidings up in the Brockenbors by the hills of Skerry. "You would have done better to come with us after all, poor old Fredegar," said Pippin, as they carried him out, too weak to walk. He opened an eye and tried gallantly to smile. "Who's this young giant with the loud voice?" he whispered. "Not little Pippin. What's your size in hats now?" Then there was Lobelia. Poor thing. She looked very old and thin when they rescued her from a dark and narrow cell. She insisted on hobbling out on her own feet, and she had such a welcome, and there was such clapping and cheering when she appeared, leaning on Frodo's arm but still clutching her umbrella, that she was quite touched and drove away in tears. She had never in her life been popular before, but she was crushed by the news of Lotho's murder, and she would not return to Bag End. She gave it back to Frodo and went to her own people, the Bracegirdles of Harbottle. When the poor creature died next spring, she was, after all, more than 100 years old. Frodo was surprised and much moved. She had left all that remained of her money, and of Lotho's, for him to use in helping hobbits made homeless by the Troubles. So that feud was ended. Old Will Whitfoot had been in the lockholes longer than any, and though he had perhaps been treated less harshly than some, he needed a lot of feeding up before he could look the part of mayor. So Frodo agreed to act as his deputy until Mr. Whitfoot was in shape again. The only thing that he did as deputy mayor was to reduce the sheriffs to their proper functions and numbers. The task of hunting out the last remnant of the ruffians was left to Merry and Pippin, and it was soon done. The southern gangs, after hearing the news of the Battle of Bywater, fled out of the land and offered little resistance to the Thane. Before the year's end, the few survivors were rounded up in the woods, and those that surrendered were shown to the borders. Meanwhile, the labor of repair went on apace, and Sam was kept very busy. Hobbits can work like bees when the mood and the need comes on them. Now there were thousands of willing hands of all ages, from the small but nimble ones of the Hobbit lads and lasses to the well-worn and horny ones of the Gaffers and Gammers. Before Yule, not a brick was left standing of the new Sheriff houses or of anything that had been built by Sharkey's men, but the bricks were used to repair many an old hole to make it snugger and drier. Great stores of goods and food, and beer, were found that had been hidden away by the ruffians in sheds and barns and deserted holes, and especially in the tunnels at Mickle Delving, and in the old quarries at Skerry, so that there was a great deal better cheer that Yule than anyone had hoped for. One of the first things done in Hobbiton, before even the removal of the new mill, was the clearing of the hill and Bag End, and the restoration of Bagshot Row. The front of the new sand pit was all leveled and made into a large sheltered garden, and new holes were dug in the southward face, back into the hill, and they were lined with brick. The gaffer was restored to number 3, and he said often, and did not care who heard it, "It's an ill wind as blows nobody no good, as I always say, and all's well as ends better." There was some discussion of the name that the new row should be given. Battle Gardens was thought of, or Better Smiles. But after a while, in sensible Hobbit fashion, it was just called New Row. It was a purely bywater joke to refer to it as Sharky's End.
Love that.
I do too. That is awesome. The trees were the worst loss and damage, for at Sharky's bidding they had been cut down recklessly far and wide over the Shire, and Sam grieved over this more than anything else. For one thing, this hurt would take long to heal, and only his great-grandchildren, he thought, would see the Shire as it ought to be. Then suddenly, one day, for he had been too busy for weeks to give a thought to his adventures, he remembered the gift of Galadriel. He brought the box out and showed it to the other travelers, for so they were now called by everyone, and asked their advice. "I wondered when you would think of it," said Frodo. "Open it." Inside it was filled with a gray dust, soft and fine, in the middle of which was a seed, like a small nut with a silver shale. "What can I do with this?" said Sam. "Throw it in the air on a breezy day and let it do its work," said Pippin. "On what?" said Sam. "Choose one spot as a nursery and see what happens to the plants there," said Merry. "But I'm sure the lady would not like me to keep it all for my own garden, now so many folk have suffered," said Sam. "Use all the wits and knowledge you have of your own, Sam," said Frodo, "and then use the gift to help your work and better it. And use it sparingly. There is not much here, and I expect every grain has a value." So Sam planted saplings in all the places where specially beautiful or beloved trees had been destroyed, and he put a grain of the precious dust in the soil at the root of each. He went up and down the Shire in this labor, but if he paid special attention to Hobbiton and Bywater, no one blamed him. And at the end he found that he still had a little of the dust left, so he went to the 3-farthing stone, which is as near the center of the Shire as no matter, and cast it in the air with his blessing. The little silver nut he planted in the party field, where the tree had once been, and he wondered what would come of it. All through the winter he remained as patient as he could, and tried to restrain himself from going round constantly to see if anything was happening. Spring surpassed his wildest hopes. His trees began to sprout and grow as if time was in a hurry and wished to make 1 year do for 20. In the party field a beautiful young sapling leaped up. It had silver bark and long leaves and burst into golden flowers in April. It was indeed a malorn, and it was the wonder of the neighborhood. In after years, as it grew in grace and beauty, it was known far and wide, and people would come long journeys to see it, the only malorn west of the mountains and east of the sea, and one of the finest in the world. Altogether, 1420 in the Shire was a marvelous year. Not only was there wonderful sunshine and delicious rain, in due times and perfect measure, but there seemed something more, an air of richness and growth, and a gleam of a beauty beyond that of mortal summers that flicker and pass upon this middle earth. All the children born or begotten in that year, and there were many, were fair to see and strong, and most of them had a rich golden hair that had before been rare among hobbits. The fruit was so plentiful that young hobbits very nearly bathed in strawberries and cream, and later they sat on the lawns under the plum trees and ate until they had made piles of stones like small pyramids or the heaped skulls of a conqueror, and then they moved on, and no one was ill, and everyone was pleased, except those who had to mow the grass. In the South Farthing the vines were laden, and the yield of leaf was astonishing, and everywhere there was so much corn that at harvest every barn was stuffed. The North Farthing barley was so fine that the beer of 1420 malt was long remembered and became a byword. Indeed, a generation later, one might hear an old gaffer in an inn, after a good pint of well-earned ale, put down his mug with a sigh. "Ah, that was proper 1420, that was." I love that.
So cool.
Oh,
Such a great ending to this story.
It really is.
It's not the very ending, but it's a great ending.
But it is such a
Shire's Coming.
wonderful wrap-up to so many things. I mean, there's some sorrow there about with Lobelia's passing and obviously the fact that Lotho had been killed, but I love Lobelia's
But I love that the grudge.
redemption. Yes.
Yeah. I love that there's, they don't hold a grudge against her. Everybody
no.
cheers when she's released.
Absolutely.
And she proves herself worthy of that.
She sure does. I love that. It's, we see redemption a lot, and here it is on a very small scale, but a very meaningful scale. I mean, her son had grown quite wealthy, before Saruman, and directly as a result of Saruman, actually, when they were working, kind of business partners before. But
Right.
I love the resilience of the hobbits. I think that's one of the things that this really speaks to in terms of hobbity nature. I mean, old Will Whitfoot had been in there for a very long time. Lobelia, 99 years old at that point. Old Fatty Bolger. Hobbits are resilient. So.
And Fatty still, he still has a little bit of a sense of humor after all.
Yeah.
He tries to smile, he tries to joke with Pippin.
Yeah, what's your size in hats?
Yeah, right. So yeah, that's really cool. You do see how quickly they were able to bounce back, and Sam of course has that fear that the Shire won't be the way it's supposed to be for a couple of generations, but then Galadriel's gift helps.
A little magic comes along. I also love that Frodo does something I think is very Hobbit-like. He shrinks the sheriffs down. He puts things back the way they ought to be in terms of the independence and kind of the society or culture.
The simplicity of this society.
We don't need a big bureaucracy here. We don't need a massive law enforcement agency because these are hobbits.
Right.
And they do the right thing because it's the right thing.
Yeah.
They get rid of the ruffians. I love the line about hobbits can work like bees.
That's a cool line.
That tells us so much about hobbits in terms of both their ability, because I think it says something about they work like bees when the need and the desire is upon them. In other words, they have to have both because they
have
are,
to have both,
otherwise they want to eat their six
Otherwise,
meals a day.
Hey, let's just hang out and let's just drink some beer. And,
But it shows that they're capable of that.
When they need to be.
Exactly.
And
when the circumstances call for it.
Yeah.
They use the bricks to shore up the old holes. I love that.
Returning to, their simpler way of life.
Absolutely. Getting rid of these big brick houses.
Tolkien must have wanted
she's a brick
to be
house.
I don't think Tolkien would have ever thought of that.
No, probably not.
But no, I mean, I'm sure Tolkien probably wished that, some of the places he visited, he had grown up in, could go back to the way things used to be.
Yeah.
Being able to roll back progress is something we all want to do sometimes.
Sometimes that is exactly what we want to do. You're not kidding. Progress.
Yeah. Quote unquote progress.
Yeah.
Some of it's good, some of it not so much.
I also liked, we need to remind ourselves of what the timeline was here. The Battle of Bywater and the passing of Saruman took place on November 3rd. So the fact that they're talking about that there's great cheer at Yule, well, it's only 6 weeks or so to Yule from here. So,
good point.
That tells you they're working really fast. Of course, the priorities, even before they get the new mill, they have to fix Bagshot Row and the Bag End and the hill. But I love that Sam he doesn't decide for himself what he's going to do for this. He
asks advice from his friends.
The Travelers, I love that name, by the way.
I love that name, the Travelers.
They're the Travelers. They're not just the heroes who saved the world. They're just the Travelers.
Right, just the Travelers. Those guys who left.
Yeah.
They came back.
And Sam's generous. He doesn't want to keep this all for his own.
Yeah, and I love that as an epilogue to the last passage that I read because of his influence on, he manages to extend his influence beyond one small garden, but he still does it with his own hands.
Yeah. And he doesn't deign to own these other gardens. These are other people's gardens, but he's giving. Yeah, exactly. Sort of the little Johnny Appleseed of the Shire here.
Yeah.
And of course the Malorn. Oh, goodness, what a moment that is.
A little bit of fairy comes to the Shire. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then when fairy shows up to the Shire, what do you see that year? Well, you get all that absolute perfection. The sun and the rain all in perfect ratios, so to speak. You get that hint of immortal
better
beauty.
Than immortal summer.
Yeah,
beauty beyond
that's
immortal
amazing.
Summer.
And then all the children that were born or begotten, and I love that, and there were many.
Right, yeah.
It was like they had a power outage or something.
There just wasn't much to do. So,
that most were blonde, interestingly. Again, a
Yeah.
little fairy touch there.
No one's sick. The fruit is plentiful.
Yep, and the 1420
Strawberries and
ale.
cream for days.
Yeah, I love that. And remember, there was an episode where I was like, "Oh yeah, was that strawberries and cream line?" Oh yeah, that wasn't in the book. It was This was what I was thinking of.
Yes,
but the movie
yeah.
made me think of Sam talking about it.
Did it at Mount Doom.
Right, when the lava's flowing and
Yeah.
they're about ready to get killed there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
great stuff.
Kept on giving with the 1420 ale. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the line about the corn. Let's see, what was this? This was there was so much corn that at harvest every barn was stuffed.
Every barn was stuffed.
I
yeah.
want to be clear. We had a discussion about this not too long ago online. I don't know if you remember this in one of the groups. Corn.
Oh, yeah. What does corn mean?
What does
Yeah.
corn mean? I guess corn really just means the primary cereal crop of a particular region.
Mm-hmm.
So as Americans, we think of corn. We think of the vegetable that
Maize.
grows on the tall stalks with, the yellow kernels and the ears, and that's maize.
Yeah.
But that's not what Tolkien would have meant. That he would have meant like barley
No,
or
he would have meant either wheat or barley
wheat,
or
rye, perhaps
possibly
in some areas.
oats. I mean, basically,
Oats,
it's just grain.
Yeah, whatever's the main cereal crop in that area. Anyway, that was an interesting little tidbit, and I thought, oh yeah, every time I've read this until now, I'm picturing barns stuffed with corn. But
Well, it's natural as Americans because that's what we usually think of. But yeah. I think, and I think you read it right. With the barley being a subset of the corn
Right.
of the previous sentence.
yeah, that's in the north part of their corn happens to be barley,
Right.
because corn just means the primary cereal crop. So,
Right.
I think I have to thank Alan R. from the UK for that because I think he was the one in that thread who
He had raised. I think he had
raised the
brought up
question.
the topic
Yeah.
in a group or something. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're a little long, but that'll do it for this third annual Tolkien Reading Day episode. Still, though, stick around. We've got a couple of good things in the bag for you.
Yes, we have some good stuff coming up in Marlman's bag, and we have some more information to share about our upcoming plans.
That's right. If you follow us on social media or if you've heard the last few episodes, we've been invited to Myth Moot 5. We've talked about how we're going to be special guests there this June. That's 2018 for those of you listening in the far future. It's out in Virginia, and it's a real exciting opportunity.
We're going to be doing something really special while we're there. We'll be doing a live episode broadcast from the main room at Myth Moot.
Yep, that's right.
We're going to be the only event in our time slot, and not that we're nervous.
I
And
know.
we'll be joined by some very special guests.
I'm getting more nervous every week, actually. I'm starting to I'm like, wow, that's so cool.
As it gets-
Oh, man, that's terrifying. What were we thinking? Are we stupid? What is this?
We'll be fine. We'll be fine. We'll
I
be
hope
among
so.
friends.
We're going to be welcoming back to the show both John Garth and Corey Olson, who we spoke with back in episodes 44 and 52, respectively. And excitingly, we're also going to get a chance to speak with Douglas A. Anderson, the editor of the oft-quoted annotated Hobbit, and Mark Ockrand, a professional conlanger and the inventor of Klingon.
Truly cannot wait for any of those. I can't wait to talk to
man.
John and Corey again, and also to meet Douglas Anderson and Mark. It's just gonna, it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah,
So
every one of them is going to be great.
You're definitely going to want to tune in.
It will be all awesome together. The show is going to air live on Facebook at the time of the event. That's Saturday, June 23rd at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. That's 6 p.m. UTC. The show will be released the next day. Maybe it'll be Monday. I mean,
Ish.
it'll be the next day-ish.
We're going to be mobile. It's,
I'll have my
the
laptop.
usual tech stuff that happens.
I'll try to edit as best I can so I can get that out to our feed, but we'll do the best we can. So that should go out the next day.
Yep. And if we stay on our current schedule, that's going to be happening right as we're wrapping up The Hobbit and getting ready for season 3. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah, kind
way
of
that
neat.
worked
Really. Now, Myth
Purely accidental, but neat.
Purely accidental. But, Myth Moot is generously covering our event registration, which also includes our meals. So it saves us a chunk, but we still have to find a way to get there, and we have to stay there for a few days. That we were trying to see if there was a bridge we could stay under, but all the trolls have blocked. We don't have the toll to pay the trolls. And travel to California, or from California, I should say, or even Texas to Virginia is not a wagon ride to Buckleberry Ferry. Farmer Maggot's not going to be able to help us out, so that means we have some costs associated with this trip.
So that's why we're coming to you to ask for your help. And we recently started a special T-shirt campaign to raise funds. These new Prancing Pony Podcast T-shirts were custom designed and are only available for a limited time. So go check it out. Go to www.customink.com/fundraising/PPPMMV, as in Prancing Pony Podcast
Myth Moot 5.
5.
Exactly.
To order yours now. Orders are going to be taken through March 31st.
And we do have a link to that on our, we should have a link to that in our show notes, and we also have
Yes,
a
we
link
will.
to that on our Facebook page. We've had, we've really tried to cover that on social media. So, if you can't remember the link, just go to our Facebook page and find it there.
Yep.
And please, if you also wouldn't mind considering joining the Fellowship of the Podcast, that's our Patreon family at patreon.com/prancingponypod. We weren't planning to do a live episode. The expenses of doing one are really, really steep. So we weren't going to do one from a moot until we got to our next goal, but we just couldn't turn this opportunity down. So we're trusting you all to help us make it happen anyway. So to make it worth your while, we've made sure to include some very fun rewards, like some exclusive content.
Like our postscripts to each episode. After we record each episode, we listen to it before it releases just to see what we missed. Anything funny, anything interesting, anything cool, or anything extremely embarrassing.
I especially like the things that embarrass Shawn. I really do.
Yeah, we love the things that embarrass each other. It's a lot of fun. We make sure to get those in there. And we put those in a maybe about 10 or so minute postscript that's available to our Patreon supporters.
Yep, and those exclusive postscripts typically release the same day as the episode they follow. So if you want access to those bonuses, be sure to join the Fellowship of the Podcast. Again, thank you to those of you who've already joined. You really, truly are helping to make this show even better.
Yes,
and we also want to give a very special shout-out to D-May in Alaska and James in Virginia. They're currently our patrons at the Care Dance contribution tier. If you want a personalized shout-out on our episodes, well, now you know where to go.
But we don't want you to feel obligated by any means. We would love you to consider signing up for the Fellowship of the Podcast, but only if you can afford it and only if you think we've earned it. We know some of you can't and are supporting us in other ways, and we are very grateful for that.
Absolutely.
So even if you can't join us at Patreon, keep enjoying the podcast. We'll keep making it.
We absolutely will. Shawn, why don't we go and get on with Bartleman's Bag?
Okay, let's do that. Well, Bartleman's got a rush delivery for us today from D-May in Alaska. Now, patrons at our Legacy of Lothlorien level and higher enjoy priority handling for all the mail they send into Bartleman's Bag. You know how Mr. Butterbur can be, so priority handling is a good thing. D-May teaches English and language arts to children, and she's got a class that's going through The Hobbit. And,
how cool is that?
Yeah, they're right around Mirkwood right now, or at least they were when we received this and recorded this episode. D-May wrote in saying, I had the students looking over the locations on the map in the book. We went from Beorn's house to the forest gate and then along the elf path. We were about the enchanted river, and then one little girl asked, did Beorn become a skin changer by falling into the enchanted river? I said, and I told my class I would write an email to some people I know who are pretty good at answers to unusual questions.
Well, who'd she send the question to besides us?
Right, I know. If she had said some unusual people I know who are pretty good at answers to unusual questions, that would be us. D-May says, now I've taught The Hobbit for over 10 years so far to all levels of children, which is awesome. Thank you for that,
so
D-May.
cool.
That's fantastic.
What a gig, huh?
I know, right? She said, I have never had this question. This little girl's theory was that maybe dwarves and men are affected differently by the enchantment. She says, I love teaching Tolkien to children. And I guess so. I mean, what a cool idea. What a cool bit of speculation. I mean, I love hearing, like, my kids' reactions to stories.
Yeah.
My
and
kids
the questions
are still,
they ask,
Yeah. And my kids are young enough, they ask a lot of questions, but they don't do this kind of speculation just yet.
No.
So so this is really cool, and I want to thank D-May for sharing it. But as for the question, Alan, I want your thoughts on this. I know Gandalf says Beorn is under no enchantment but his own, so I kind of can probably guess what I think you'll say, but I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it really is an interesting question. I'm actually sorry to say that I think the answer is no, but I just can't find a good reason to reach any other conclusion. I mean, not only does Gandalf explicitly tell us, like you said, that he's under no enchantment but his own, but there are a couple of other clues as to why the enchanted river likely has nothing to do with Beorn's shape-shifting abilities. The first, and this is pretty important, Gandalf suspected that Beorn and others like him originally came from the mountains, which are even further away from Mirkwood. And second, in other words, he was not the first of his kind. His kind came from a place further away from the river than even he was. Second, his nature as a skin changer appears to be genetic. It's something that he inherited, most likely. We don't know that for sure. I mean, if he's the first one, that's fine. But we do know that for many generations after this, the text tells us that the men of his line had the power of taking bear shape. So it's definitely a genetic thing. And third, I just have to say, it seems like Beorn lived this isolated life really on purpose. I can't really even imagine him exploring Mirkwood that far to the east on a frequent basis, not enough to fall into it. I mean, he knew about the river. He knew that it was enchanted and to tell them don't drink of it. But I don't know if he knows that from firsthand experience. I mean, Radagast or any other travelers, perhaps. But I just
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't see him
It
being
doesn't,
a guy
it doesn't
that goes
seem
there.
like he's not the kind of guy who's going to go roving that far.
No,
to
no,
go
not
close
that
enough to the river.
direction. I mean, he's more
Yeah.
focused on the west, on the mountains, on the orcs and the wargs, goblins
Yeah.
and the wargs, I should say. But
Yeah.
That's
And
just where I'm
protecting
at.
his homestead. I mean, that's
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of what he's.
That's his
That's kind of what he's all
primary
about. There's really no reason for him to go that far.
Yeah.
That far north to close to where the elves are.
True.
Another thing that kind of occurs to me is just we talked about where we believe the enchantment on the stream comes from.
Right,
And
right.
the idea that Bilbo and Bombur had pretty similar reactions. Well, Bilbo's dream in regards to the elves.
Right, the
was
dream
very
of food
similar
and
to
the dream of the Elven King
right,
and all of that.
Right, that was very similar to the enchantment that that happened to Bombur as a result
Right.
of falling in the stream, and so it seemed like obviously those
And
two
Bilbo's
things
not a dwarf.
are related. Bilbo's not a dwarf. Bilbo's actually much more closely related to a man like Beorn than he is to a dwarf.
That's true.
And so if we think that Bilbo's enchantment and Bombur's enchantment are from a similar source, then there's no reason
Yeah.
that Bilbo should have a closer reaction to the dwarf than he has to Beorn.
That's true.
You know what I mean? So
it's hard to imagine.
I'm kind of landing in the same place.
It's hard to imagine that with both Bombur and Bilbo having reaction A to the enchantment,
Right.
that Beorn would have reaction
That Beorn, a
Y,
man who's actually
and
closer related to Bilbo, would actually have a totally
something
different.
radically different. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
And radically different indeed, because I mean you're talking about falling asleep and forgetting who you are versus
Gaining
this awesome
shapeshifting
ability to turn
abilities,
into a
yeah.
bear, which is awesome.
Which is like, cool, where do I sign up?
Right. Dunk me in the river, man. Come on.
I'll take a swim. Very
yeah.
cool. Well, thank you, D-May. And that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Now, still don't leave. Please wait for the music. It's coming up soon. As always, we do thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to having you join us again next time when we really get to Chapter 11 of The Hobbit.
And I'll say what I said last time, because I should have saved it for this time. We'll finally get to the Lonely Mountain, but will our heroes be able to get inside?
Aha, good question. Well, folks, we want to encourage you all to read along and take notes in your copy of The Hobbit. So please check out the official library tab on our website, theprancingponypodcast.com. We've got links to everything from inexpensive paperbacks to some really good stuff for your Tolkien collection.
And in the meantime, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes for us and leaving a review, we'd be grateful. Those reviews help us get more visibility in iTunes, and that translates to a bigger community of Tolkien lovers.
And thanks to those of you who have, by the way. We read every single one of them, and we do truly appreciate all the nice things you say about us.
And that's why we've actually started picking out one every week to feature on our social media networks as a way of saying thank you every Thankful Thursday.
Yes.
So if you'd like to see your name or your alias in lights on our pages, now it's easy. All you have to do is leave a review. And make sure you never miss an episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast by subscribing to the show through iTunes or your favorite podcast app. And you can find us in most any podcast directory now, including Spotify.
Yay! And we're also on Potable now as well. Potable's a podcast discovery platform that finds new and emerging creators and recommends them to you, kind of like the Netflix algorithms do.
Yep.
While other apps make you sort through, clunky charts to find your favorite podcasts, Potable learns your interests, and instead it recommends new shows and episodes, both popular shows and undiscovered gems. So you can spend less time searching and more time listening.
And we want to thank all of you who've become part of our social media family. We set out to start a community and a Tolkien conversation that everyone could join, which is why we have our online common room on Facebook at the Prancing Pony Podcast, on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod, and on Instagram now at Prancing Pony Pod.
And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, or what you're reading this Tolkien Reading Day to barliman@theprancingponypodcast.com. And we'll try to get them into our next episode. Oh, well, it has still, no matter how long this has been, it is still far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.